This lesson is part of our 5th grade Social Studies unit, A New Nation. We will continue learning about the origins of our government. After watching the slide presentation, you will take a quiz over what you learn. There are 2 learning goals for this lesson. The first is to identify the issue at the Constitutional Convention that led to the Great Compromise and how it was resolved. The second issue is to identify what led to the 3/5 compromise and explain what the 3/5 compromise was. One of the main issues at the Constitutional Convention was how states would be represented in Congress. Each state wanted as much representation as possible because the representatives give each state power in decision making. The large states wanted population to determine the number of representatives. This would favor bigger states and give them more representatives. This was known as the Virginia Plan. The small states were worried they wouldn't have enough say in decisions. They wanted every state to have an equal number of representatives. This plan favored the smaller states and is known as the New Jersey Plan. Roger Sherman presented a plan for compromise. He proposed that Congress would be divided into 2 houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives would be based on population, like the larger states wanted. The Senate would be based on equal representation, like the smaller states wanted. Another challenging issue centered on the issue of slavery. The delegates could not agree on whether enslaved people would be counted when determining the number of representatives each state had. States with large numbers of enslaved people would gain more representatives if they were counted as part of the population. Delegates also could not agree on whether enslaved people would be counted when determining how much each state would pay in taxes. Here, states with large numbers of enslaved people did not want to count them because they would have to pay more taxes. The 3/5 compromise was the decision that every 5 enslaved people would count as 3 people for both taxation and representation purposes. Let's check our learning goals. For each statement, think about whether it is true or false. Number 1, the large states wanted to have representation in Congress be equal for all states. That is false. The large states wanted representation to be based on population, so they would have more representatives than smaller states. Number 2, the states with large numbers of enslaved people wanted them to be counted for both taxation and representation purposes. Number 2 is also false. States with many enslaved people wanted them counted for representation to gain more representatives, but did not want them counted as part of taxation because they would have to pay more in taxes. Number 3, the 3/5 compromise said that every 5 slaves would count as 3 people for both taxation and representation purposes. Number 3 is true. Number 4, the small states wanted to have representation in Congress be equal for all states. Number 4 is true. Number 5, the Great Compromise established 2 houses in Congress, one based on population and one based on equal representation. Number 5 is also true. If you need to review this information before taking the quiz, press the arrow to replay. If you are ready for the quiz, select Next.